Hi, welcome to the Yacht Business podcast with me, David Fuller. In this episode, I talk to James Pleasance, Executive Director of the World Match Racing Tour, about where match racing sits in the wider sailing world and new initiatives to provide access and increase diversity in the sport. Welcome, James, to the podcast. It's been a while since we've caught up.
Thank you. It has.
And
it's been some years.
Yeah, probably pre-pandemic and a bit before that. But I actually wanted to start with that because the disruptions, because of COVID and various things, had a big impact on all sorts of sport, including the World Match Racing Tour. So how long do you think things will take to get back to normal? Are they back to normal? And maybe what are some of the more permanent impacts of the pandemic on the tour?
Hi, and thanks for having me on this podcast. Yeah, good to touch base again. Yeah, it's been look. I think it's been a challenging few years, and not just for the sailing industry, but international sports overall, particularly with us as a global sports property, a sailing property, and I'm based in the UK, and we don't have events in the UK at the moment. So the lockdown, was particularly difficult, not just in my own country where we were stuck, but also gaining access to other countries. So it was particularly difficult, after launching a very strong World Match Racing Tour season under the new ownership of the tour in January 2020. And then just a couple of months after that, to have the pretty much the whole world shut down was
a few weeks afterwards, I would say.
Well, I'm going to say a few weeks the news came out, but it wasn't until, I guess, whenever I forget the actual, it's all a blur. I forget the actual date we were locked down. Obviously not being able to travel to countries made it difficult, and we had to call all of our stakeholders and events, and there was a lot of disorganizing of events rather than organizing, which is and that continued really through 20 and to a large extent last year, and to some extent still this year. I don't there's no magic switch that says, okay, just because we don't have to wear a face mask anymore on an airplane, for example, that doesn't mean that the world is necessarily, come out of this completely. So,
and you've had to relocate your final this year to Sydney as opposed to China, where it was going to be. Is that correct?
Right, and actually in 2020 that was a terrific deal for us, agreeing a long-term deal with the government of Shenzhen in China to host the finals. You'll remember previously we had a agreement in Malaysia with the Monsoon Cup, and this reflected a similar arrangement. However, a lot of the world was closed in 2020, so unfortunately we were not able to run the championship in China in 2020. However, we were able to relocate the championship, and it was hosted by the Royal Bermuda Yacht Club. So actually in 2020, we were one of only two world championships in the sport of sailing to go ahead, and both of them were match racing events. One was the Youth Match Racing Worlds in Auckland and the Tour in Bermuda, albeit under some fairly strict COVID rules.
Right.
In 20. And then for 2021, we kind of reset and pushed ahead with plans to host the event in Shenzhen in China. But China is one of the countries that has not yet fully opened. And so we were not able to host the championship in Shenzhen again last year. So we actually cancelled the championship last year. And then we reset again for this year. Sadly, the rules haven't yet changed in China. So we've relocated the final this year in a kind of late arrangement with the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia out of Sydney Harbour, who have kindly agreed to co-host the finals with us from 13th to 18th of December. So we're looking forward to that.
Is there other impacts in terms of things like, moving kit around the world with supply chains disrupted and containers being a lot more expensive than they used to be, and even flights for that matter, with moving competitors trying to do business, their budgets to try and get to events if the airfares are significantly higher than what they were pre-pandemic?
Yes, and yes is the answer to that. We have one distinct advantage on the tour in that the way our business model works and has always worked on the tour is the boats are supplied by each of the events. And so actually we don't ship anything. So we ship a few flags and banners and mobile phones. And so we haven't had to deal with the shipping issues of moving containers around, which is good for the environment as well, and always has been for us. But I understand from talking to other major events, moving containers around, it's been incredibly difficult and expensive to move containers. Flights, yes, flights are more expensive now, particularly coming out of, if we can use that term, coming out of the pandemic, as a lot of airlines that were forced into lockdowns and, at huge financial cost to them, I'm sure they're trying to recoup costs as well. So yes, we have noticed flights being a lot more expensive, and that has an impact on not just us as organizers, but competitors as well.
And fortunately, we're not moving. Do fans travel to World Match Racing events, or are they more local fan bases rather than people who travel in?
They're more local, to be honest. I mean, we do have some followers that follow us around, which is great. But generally, the fan bases are more local. Unlike your sort of Formula One, motorsport, where people will take a 2-3 week holiday off to go and visit a Formula One. I mean, yes, we'll get to that stage one of these days, but not at the moment. So our fan base is more local.
So I was going to ask that in terms of your venue selection, and I know that's been disrupted a lot because of the pandemic, but you've also been trying to do some new things, whether that be the women's tour or the youth tour. Is the selection of venues, and I also know that World Match Racing Tour is a little bit different, as you've mentioned, because you have certain requirements from an event in terms of what they need to provide in the way of infrastructure. What are you looking to get out of venues, and what are venues looking to get out of you in the current climate?
When we look for venues for the World Match Racing Tour, we're looking for obviously good sailing venues with good weather/wind conditions at any time of the year, and we're also looking for venues that may be either independent promoters or largely yacht clubs or infrastructures that are already in place, in particular to those that can provide a fleet of boats. And that tends to be at yacht clubs that have fleets of boats that they use for training or corporate activities year round. And again, that goes towards us not having to ship boats around the world, which currently, under the sustainability initiatives that we're all trying to achieve, I think is one huge thing in our favor. So we will look for venues that have a lot of that infrastructure and facilities in place. There are some venues, for example, not to name any in particular, but in the Middle East, we've never had a World Match Racing Tour event in the Middle East, something I've always wanted to do. There are not necessarily that sort of infrastructure and facilities set up in certain venues yet. So we also have the opportunity to be able to take boats in and facilities into a venue as well. So that's what we will look for. In terms of what venues can expect from us, well, with a longest running professional sailing series in the sport of sailing now, we have a good background, a good legacy, and if the events are funded well, both through the venue and through our own partners, we can come with a very comprehensive TV package and media package, which can really put a location on the map through a broad media distribution, particularly in TV, which we've done very well in the past. Certainly over the last few years, it's been a little quieter for obvious reasons.
Yeah. I'll get onto that in a little bit, as I wanted to talk about how technology and media technology has impacted rights holders. But before we get to that, I was actually thinking that probably the tech that has impacted the World Match Racing Tour more than anything else was foiling catamarans with wing sails.
Yeah, certainly when we started the tour, and we're 22 years in the tour, and it was started in 2000. As a match racing tour, we was largely set up as a stepping stone to the America's Cup, and you'll know well then it was the version 5 boats, and so we had all of the America's Cup teams and sailors sailing on the tour, and just about all of the cup skippers that you and I would be able to name in the last however many years have been either champions or through the tour at one point or another, whether it's Russell Coutts, Dean Barker, Ben Ainsley, Jimmy Spithill, and so on and so forth. Now, when we started the tour, we were I'm even going to say we were pretty much the only global tour, and that has shifted certainly in the last 20 years, but more recently in the last 5 to 10 years with the introduction of the multi-hulls at the Cup, and then from there the evolution of foiling boats. We did move the tour into multi-hulls in 2016 for a few years, and that was under the ownership of the tour at the time, and that certainly aligned us with the Cup again. Then when it started to go foiling with the current Cup boats, obviously that's not something that our current events, yacht clubs, have. They don't have fleets of AC 75s readily available, and so the the tour still remains a match racing tour as the America's Cup does, but the boats have remained as those that are provided by the club, which are largely monohull boats. There's certainly been a shift in technology. I still like to think that the America's Cup, for example, is and always will be at the moment a match racing event, and we are a world match racing tour. So if regardless of the boat, the skills that you acquire in match racing can be on a monohull or a foiling multi-hull. Because someone asked me the other day, well, would the tour open out to foiling boats? My answer is very simple. Absolutely. It comes down to if there is a fleet of foiling boats, and we've watched the development of the 69F.
Is that the Persico one or the
Persico? I believe you can fit 6 of them into a single container. They can be moved around very easily. Could we see a fleet of 69Fs at a World Match Racing Tour event in Marstrand in Sweden? Well, that would be challenging, but not impossible. Or another venue. Absolutely, why not? But
that's not exactly as level playing field as what you've got now, right? And I understand that sort of getting on and off of different boats, maybe favors certain skippers. Ian Williams has sailed in Bermuda many times, probably understands that boat fairly well. Torvar seems to understand the M32 fairly well, but someone who is used to sailing moths or foiling cats is going to be able to have a distinct advantage over someone who's never foiled.
You're right, and I would agree with that, but it's an evolution, it's a development. If we were to put, let's say, a foiling boat on the tour at the end of next year or the middle of next year, and teams have sufficient time and there's an opportunity to train and acquire skills to sail those boats, I don't think it's impossible. But you're right. You are right. There are those that have more skill on those boats and less on even your traditional monohull match racing boats. We've had this great conversation, foiling is the future of the sport. It may well be. I draw the parallel between, you take skiing, for example. For many years, the sport of skiing was on 2 skis, and then along comes this thing called snowboarding. And everyone goes, well, snowboarding's the future of the sport and skiing's dead. Now look at how the two live together. Sure. The sport, the whole has become greater than the sum of the parts.
I had a chat with Justin Chisholm last week about the new AC40 and the fact that it's basically remote controlled, push buttons here and push buttons there, and maybe the kind of skill set that the World Match Racing Tour used to be able to provide, which was just, dial up after dial up, race after race, one-on-one after one-on-one, maybe doesn't give in as much advantage as it once might have.
No, I would agree. I think it's certainly less so than it was. I think the way these crews are set up and the way these foiling boats are designed and set up to sail now require not just the match racing know-how and skill, but the sheer skill of being able to foil a boat at the sort of speeds that they're doing, which is, I mean, it's phenomenal to see. And that's not something that, you know, we currently have on the World Match Racing Tour. I would love to have a fleet of, you know, the AC40s traveling around the world on a World Match Racing Tour, but I think that's not feasible just at the moment.
Right.
I don't think the match racing skill set has disappeared, but I think there's a whole new level of skill required now to get around, and if we align it with the America's Cup, to get around an America's Cup race course, and that might be doing it at 50 knots in, you know, however many feet above the water, which is
right,
certainly another level.
We touched on it just a few moments ago, but you say that you've got a pretty good TV, and you've been in this industry a long time. You've got very good relationships. How has things like being able to broadcast directly to fans via something like YouTube changed the game?
Well, I think it's made it a lot more accessible, and it's not just via YouTube. I mean, we have traditionally on the tour had a free to air model. We've dabbled in selling TV rights in the past, and that's not something that traditionally sailing as a sport has been particularly successful at. And so, with the exception of some previous America's Cups, I should say. So our model has tended to be more towards maximizing our exposure rather than rights revenues. And that started off through mainstream broadcast channels, both terrestrial live coverage and through highlights shows, through networks, cable networks around the world. And then with the introduction of, and this was even before drones came around, you know, we had cameras hanging out of helicopters and blimps and cranes in the early days. And then with the onset of YouTube, and in particular with social media now, I mean, I'd even go to say it's less YouTube, it's more your Instagrams and Facebooks. I think it's just made the accessibility a lot faster and easier for those that are following. They can follow at any time. They can log in and follow at any time of day or night. They don't necessarily have to dial in at a particular time to watch. So I think the whole way both you and I, and even, you know, my teenage children are consuming media now has changed dramatically for the good, I would say, but changed dramatically. I mean, a lot of teenage children now who talk to don't watch traditional TV anymore, even to the point they don't even have a TV license. It's all streaming online, whether it's through Amazon or Netflix or the
linear programming is dead. I just can't understand why anyone would have to say, well, I'm going to have to wait until 8 p.m. on a Wednesday to watch just a highlight show. It's just not. Why do I have to do that in 2023?
Yeah, I agree. At the same time, the audiences that one has on their own YouTube channel or a Facebook channel are a lot more limited than you know a network would have in place as well. I'll give you an example. You know, we can put a live or a highlight show on the World Match Racing Tour YouTube page or a Facebook page. We then have to get out, promoted, and make sure enough people see and watch it. You put the same show on a Eurosport, just to throw a network out there, which has a very broad coverage across 50 plus countries in multiple languages. Although the audience might not be tuning in at a particular time, there is a much broader reach. So I'm not sure I would say it's dead through that more traditional channels. I think it's still certainly for us, I think it's still necessary and has very good value. But I think, much like we were talking about the technology of the boats, the technology of media, there's a whole new level now that I like to think gives us more opportunity and reach.
But does it wash its face in terms of the production? I imagine you have to spend, still got to get camera people out there or drones out there, or whether you're doing live commentary or not, or whether you're, packaging it up in an editing room. That's all time consuming and expensive. So how does that work?
It's time consuming and I mean, sailing to televise sailing, and we've had this conversation, I know, many times before. Televising sailing, where you don't have a fixed camera on a football stadium, for example. You're already into remote cameras on the back of boats or with GoPros, and you're needing to get live footage off a race course. That inherently is a more expensive it's a more expensive sport to televise well. The costs of production, I don't think, have changed a great deal, whether it's through a traditional broadcast network or through social media. It still takes the same amount of personnel and or technology to get that shot, whether it's from a skipper microphone or someone on board. I mean, obviously there's been huge developments in technology since I started with the tour, and you mentioned the drone, which is one of them. I mean, we didn't have drones, and I started the tour. I spent every event trying to rent cranes and blimps at events, which was, and that only gave you a certain distance from the shore. Now for a couple of $100, you can have a drone hovering over a race course, and you can live film an entire race. And that's huge for it. And I think a great opportunity for all sports. I know the folks at SailGP have invested a huge amount in their television coverage, and are doing it remotely as well, which is incredibly impressive, whereby the whole TV production can be run from a studio. I know it's in London, and you can have an event in Dubai or Sydney, and that's extended to the officials and umpires that are live umpiring races from a studio in London. I think it's phenomenal, and it's been impressive to see. With the World Match Racing Tour, we're not at that level yet, but certainly take a huge learning from what they've been doing, and I'd love to see us be able to do that in the future.
This is the Yacht Business Podcast, available on all major podcast networks, including Apple and Spotify. Please subscribe to make sure you get the latest episodes delivered straight to you as soon as they're published. Each episode also has its own webpage at yachtbusiness.biz, where you can find links, bookmarks, and further reading on some of the subjects covered. Now back to the show. And what about some of the other things that other sports have implemented, whether that be heartbeat monitors or other wearable data devices that are pinging back interesting information about what's going on? Have you experimented with any of that?
We've done a little bit of it in the past, not so much now, because it's, again, these things do require budgets, but this whole development of traditional TV watching now to, I don't know what the technical term is in the media. Is it twin screening or double screening, where you
something like that?
A soccer match, you're watching it on television, and most of a lot of the fans, particularly the younger fans, will have either a phone and or an iPad, and they're watching live stats, whether it's heartbeats, whether it's
distance covered or whatever,
distance covered, whatever, whether they've even got a sports bet on the game, and it's not uncommon now to see, and I see it in Formula One as well. I mean, the data that they've been able to extract from a Formula One race over like an hour and a half is quite phenomenal, both on the TV screen, but for the fans that want the additional information, you can go on the app on an iPad or a phone at the same time you're watching TV. And I think that technology has been super impressive across a lot of sports, whether it's tennis, golf, with the whole live line, overlaying graphics over TV footage is incredibly impressive. With the World Match Racing Tour, traditionally our events, the technology side of the boats has not necessarily been the stars. We're all about building heroes and champions and names on the tour. The ability to be able to put a camera on board and a microphone on a skipper, I think is something that we've not always been able to do, and now we can do a lot easier.
What about the individual teams and their coaches? Are they using that sort of technology to be better or to analyze their races and to train?
A lot of the teams don't come with coaches to World Match Racing Tour events. Some do, some don't. I've certainly seen an increase in wearables. I'm not an expert, but these days, and I wear one myself, one of these Garmin watches, which can give you a lot of information, whether it's on a golf course when I'm playing badly, or on a sailing regatta. And so I've definitely seen more of those being used by teams. And we have to be a little bit careful in the match racing world as to how much of that technology we should allow, and how much is fair and not fair.
In terms of ley lines and other sorts of things like that,
right? And traditionally that we don't have instrumentation on the boats in match racing, so it really comes down to a pure skill of the sailor. But there's certainly wearables that give a lot of that accurate information now, and we see that a lot more. As it with Formula One, I think even with SailGP, they share a lot of the data as well. So to be able to see the speed, the relative speeds, the distance before or behind competitors, with these, certainly the overlaying of graphics on TV that I've been particularly impressed with. Sailing, as you know, is very hard to show a television audience. You can get phenomenal footage on board a boat, whether you have cameras, whether it's helmet cameras, onboard microphone skippers, or even a cameraman on board, or woman on board the boat. As a perspective of a sailing race, to have these overlay graphics has been very impressive, and that's something I'd like to see a lot more of. I think it's a very good way to show those that are not necessarily sailing diehard fans what's happening. The beauty of match racing is there's only ever two boats on the course. And so rather than having to follow 50 white sails and work out who's in the lead, there are two boats. It's a 15-minute race, and the first one over the line wins. And so it's the one thing match racing, whether it's at our level or the cup, does have in its favor, I would say.
It's very hard to please everyone. It's very hard to please the purists who love them displacement monohulls and their match racing and want to geek out on the dial-ups and the tactics, versus people who have come to the sport a little bit later on and are looking for speed. Getting that balance right is really, really difficult, without patronizing the people who know exactly what they're talking about, and providing a product that is approachable and accessible for a new fan base is a really fine line to walk.
Yeah, I agree, and it's always, it is not so much of a problem. It's always been a challenge of a lot of sailing events that have televised either live or in highlights. Getting that message across, trying to attract a fan base that, like you say, doesn't patronize them, gives them enough information to understand what's going on, but gives them excitement as well. A foiling monohull or multi-hull at 50 plus knots is exciting, regardless of what else is happening on the boat. We have to perhaps work a little bit harder with the more displacement monohulls, but I'd actually put it to you that, some of our previous, one-on-one match racing footage, if you televise it properly on board, and we'll actually have camera crews on board the boats with all of these, the skipper and crew microphoned up.
Different people watch Formula One for different reasons. Some people are sitting there counting the laps to the pit stop, and some people are, all they care about is the red car in front. So
exactly. No, you're right. And I go back to our kind of mantra over the years, and our hashtag that we've never changed, which is where champions are made. We've always focused, because of the, we're not necessarily in the technology of the boats, because a lot of the boats used on the tour are older boats. We've always focused on creating heroes and champions in this sport, building profiles. There are those that, like you say, love to geek out on the technology of the boats, and there's plenty of that in the sport for them to follow. But what we've found is that a lot of fans and followers love to watch rivalries.
It's also a fantastic leveler. You can be a 3-time gold medalist and get onto one of these boats and get beaten soundly just because, it's a different environment, a different set of
Yeah.
tactics. On the other hand, you might be someone who, like a Ben Ainsley, who literally, gets on in his first season, wins the championship just because he's naturally talented.
And then we'll have new teams and new sailors who will come on the tour from nowhere and start beating these 3-4 time world champions, which I think is, and we try and make as much of a story out of that as we can. You draw the parallel with Formula One. You're right. There's a lot of motor racing fans out there that want to know every string of carbon fiber that's put into whatever system it might be, and the type of tires that are being used. And there's the fan base that just wants to see the rivalry between, let's say, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, and it's all about who out of those two is going to win the net, who's going to come in first for their pit stop. Though the way that Formula One, and it's been built for them in many ways, that rivalry between those names is so much of the story, almost more so than currently than the technology, I would say. And I think sailing can take a lot from that.
A little bit of a theme at the moment, looking at sort of new technologies and how new technology might disrupt or impact the marine industry in general, but for your parts of things, being a rights holder and an events organizer, are there any technologies that you can see that may have an impact on the World Match Racing Tour in the future, in the near future, far future?
I think a lot of the technology we're seeing now will impact the sport in general, but for the good, as far as I can see at the moment, and I don't profess to being an expert, it would be impact for the good. And a lot of the technology we've already seen in the sport that we talked about, being able to, if I look at what we're doing on the World Match Racing Tour, being able to maybe even officiate matches remotely from studios in parts of the world, I think that's quite a leap in using technology to reduce whether it's flights or emissions or whatever. I think that's a very smart move. The TV production technology, not only from drones, but the ability to get live pictures from above or on board a boat has come on leaps and bounds over the last certainly 20 years, but even technology moves so fast. I mean, even over the last 6 months or 12 months. And it's interesting to look at.
When I started working with the tour with Torvald Mirsky and those guys early on, I still had a Sony Handycam. I couldn't film anything on my phone.
Well, and also not just with TV footage, but take photography as well. When I started in this industry, and that wasn't that long ago, it was all SLR cameras with slides, and you had to have slides processed, and there was a 24-hour turnaround just to select the best pictures. Now, with digital photography, we can have a picture taken from the top mark of a match racing event, and it can be on the sports desk of a media or a newspaper or a sponsor or stakeholder within 60 seconds at a quality arguably better than a slide film. And so technology, not just with TV, but photography as well. And you combine all that together, the technology that has allowed the sport of sailing to be distributed to fans has been quite remarkable, and I can see that developing further. The ability now to have a fan put on a whatever they call it, like the was it Oculus goggles,
VR goggles, yeah,
and ride live during a race. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, not just watching a drone footage or an onboard footage on a TV or whatever, however many screens you're following, but to be able to be immersed live into sport like that, whether it's in the driving seat of a Formula One car or a live match racing boat or AC-75 doing 50 knots. I can see a lot more of that coming.
I know that virtual regatta and some of the offshore gaming has been phenomenally popular over the few years. Hundreds of thousands of people playing the online game, maybe even more people than are even watching, to be honest. Can you see any sort of thing in that sense?
I do a lot. And we became very close to doing it. I mean, certainly during the pandemic when people couldn't go out sailing, they took to the iPads or whatever it was, and the virtual regatta, I had a phenomenal run during COVID. I think there was over 1 million. I stand corrected. I think there was over 1 million competitors of the Vendée Globe or whatever, one of the round the world races, which is quite astonishing. People getting up at all times of the night to change the direction of their boat, and I think that was a real development again with technology meeting gaming, meeting this online experience that sailing was able to grab. We got very close to, and I think we'll set it up. There's a cost element to it. We will do it in the future, whereby with a match race, again, very simple. You can have a friend, or we can have a whole ladder system. We can have a whole online and world match racing tour, whereby you simply select your competitor and you have to do a 15-minute match race. I think that's ripe for us to do, and hopefully would give us a new following and an audience as well. It uses very much the same sailing rules as exist already through a lot of the other things virtual regatta are doing. The only difference would be you won't be in a fleet of 20 boats, you'll be a one-on-one. That'll be a great opportunity for us. Yeah, something we've actually got in the works but haven't taken live.
Yeah, there's always budget element to these things.
Sadly there is, yeah.
What about blockchain? Yeah. Have you been paying attention to this SailGP DAO team owned by a blockchain DAO thing?
I'm following it with interest. I think the idea of having a team run, I don't know how they do it, virtually under a DAO or a DAO funded team, I think is pretty bold, pretty ambitious. It's not really been done before, so I congratulate them on investigating, taking a direction. I think
the entire World Match Racing Tour could be a tokenomic based system, because it's a decentralized, distributed set of events anyway. You could create an economy where basically every tour card was an NFT, every trophy was an NFT, the prize money was distributed as a token based on results that the events got to share in the whole tour could be turned into a tokenomics based DAO.
I would certainly not close the door on that opportunity. I think, and you talk about where's technology going. I mean, look, I am not an expert in this, but I read and follow it with interest. The idea of having a group come together and having a team funded by this sort of decentralized, whatever it is, a DAO or whatever, an individual being able to invest in these teams, whether it's an America's Cup team or a World Match Racing Tour team or a SailGP team, I think it's quite cool.
Well, it's also trends, isn't it? I mean, you had back in the day, first you had tobacco, and then that went away, and now there was a bit of a sports betting. They had all the money. Financial services had all the money for a while, and now it seems that the cryptocurrency blockchain space is where all the marketing money is sloshing around, or at least was until they all crashed at the beginning of the year.
There's been a lot of fast money in that world, and still is. I'm a little skeptical sometimes, but then there's tangible results of it as well. So not sure if anyone really knows where the crypto world is going to be 6 months from now or 12 months from now. I know a lot of big sporting events, and you see it in Formula One as well, have taken a huge financial backing from the crypto world, and I don't think it's going to disappear. So
there is a lot of crossover between Formula One fans and crypto fans, though. I mean, it's a latest technology, high performance kind of. I don't know if you heard the big conversation I had with a guy called Jonny Dodge a few weeks ago, who runs a Grand Prix promotion team, but also runs a super yacht charter company. And he's seeing a lot of younger guys, mostly guys, come into these sports with a lot of cash generated from the crypto space, and it's changing the game literally, all the way down to the way a super yacht is used and designed.
There's a lot of synergy, crossover, the synergy with some of these sports, and including sailing, when you talk about performance and strategy and making quick decisions and split-second decisions. And we've experienced it with our previous title sponsor, a global FX company, that the synergy between that and a lot of yacht racing, but particularly match racing, those making split-second decisions and having a good strategy with your race and the performance and getting the speed. There's a lot of crossover, and it fits very well into certainly the FX world, as we found, but also now to crypto, whether it's trading or other. So I think we'll see more of that in the sport.
I think the biggest use for blockchain potentially within sailing would be at like a sailing CV level. If the results of your sailing as a professional sailor, if the results of your sailing were written into the blockchain in an immutable form, that basically then you could go back and say, okay, here is the record of who came what where, and it couldn't be changed. That could have some interesting impact for things like rankings. But anyway.
It's funny you mentioned rankings. There are some issues at the moment with some of the rankings. That having a world ranking in whatever sport, provides the backbone of a lot of sports, particularly what we do on the World Match Racing Tour, where the winner of the tour, or the Open Tour, is the official match racing world champion. The backbone to all of that, and how sailors and skippers and teams can reach that world championship, is through the rankings. And so having the rankings and the information that pertains to it is very much a backbone of certainly what we're doing. Our tour is an open tour, but like you said earlier, we've also launched this year the Women's World Match Racing Tour, which I'm really excited about. And that came after a lot of conversation over whether sports should, and particularly with the World Match Racing Tour, should it be a mixed discipline? Should we mandate mixed crews in all of the events? I don't think that's necessarily the solution at the moment to increase female participation in the sport. I think the issues that have been up until now is for a lot of the female sailors to have opportunity in the sport.
Right.
Yes, occasionally a crew will have to have one female crew member, and I see that a lot as a sort of box ticking exercise and a press release, to be harsh there, rather than creating real opportunity for women to compete at a level, not just as one member of a crew, but as a team. And we've seen the Women's World Match Race Tour has been a great success. In 2013, the Women's International Match Racing Association created the WIM series, the Women's International Match Racing Series, for 5 or 6 years, and that quietened down just prior to the pandemic. And that's essentially what we've taken on with their full support, and we've refreshed and rebranded as the Women's World Match Racing Tour. And we put 4 events on the tour this year, and they've all been oversubscribed. We've had, like I say, nearly over 120 female match racing sailors, that's skippers and crews, compete on the tour. Currently, it's the sport's only professional sailing series for women. So I'm excited.
Well, it was such a shame that it was killed from the Olympics, wasn't it? I mean, there was so much investment put into match racing when there was that women's match racing medal.
Well, London 2012. It was one of, and again, I'll stand corrected, but I recall someone saying it was one of the most watched of the sailing live TV because again, it's relatively easy to follow. It's 2 boats around a course. It's like a boxing mat on water, and I think even the generic sports fans can understand that. Could match racing and should match racing be in the Olympics again in the future? I certainly think it could be. I know that the sport's got a problem an issue with increasing the quota of athletes that sailing is allowed in the Olympics. Something that we've discussed recently and just at the World Sailing Annual Conference was the idea of being able to multiple medal in sailing. I'll give you the example of that is you take an existing Olympic squad across the various dinghy classes that are not team sports, that are individual or two person. And then during the Olympics, out of that squad, put a match racing team together, which means you don't increase the athletes, but you do increase the medals.
Like a relay in a swimming relay.
Exactly that. Now you look at LA 2028 coming up after Paris. The sailing venue for LA 2028 is the end of Belmont's Pier in Long Beach, which is where the Congressional Cup has run one of the sport's leading match races for the last 60 odd years. So match racing's ready for it. And the beauty of it is no one has to buy a boat because they'll already be there. I'll always fly that flag. Getting it through the system and actually making it happen is something that may or may not ever happen, but there's a lot of support for it.
Just going back to diversity, and I know I personally right now, I don't think that the gender diversity is the issue in sailing. The bigger issue to me at the moment seems to be cultural diversity sailing. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, France, UK is still very much seen to be the dominant nations. Is there any way that the World Match Racing Tour can work through the academy to build it out in territories where it doesn't traditionally have a base?
Yes, absolutely. And I think interestingly, we've been talking about setting up several academies, sailing and match racing academies in Asia, including China, which and the project's a little bit on hold at the moment for reasons we talked about post-pandemic. Match racing lends itself quite well to getting new people into sailing, whether it's just two boats. I mean, there's obviously got to be a certain level of sailing knowledge and racing knowledge. But yeah, absolutely. I think the whole sport needs to focus on that, not just us. We've had we've taken the tour to a number of venues in the world that are not always in the more dominant countries that you mentioned.
Was there ever a legacy of the Malaysian connection? I know you're in Malaysia a lot. A lot of the finals were held there.
The legacy was for just over 10 years, and it went quiet after the ownership moved on from there. But that was hugely successful, not just taking and promoting sailing in Malaysia through the Monsoon Cup, which was also the final of the tour, but also the Malaysian Match Racing League. There were two separate leagues that went around Malaysia and put, I think it was somewhere in the region of 15,000 children, a lot of whom had never been into sailing, and it got them on board as well. And that was a fabulous legacy that was 10 to 12 years, and something that has gone a little quieter since the pandemic, but something that could very easily be started up again.
Yeah, so there is a model, and I think Man Sail did something similar, not with match racing, but certainly if there's political will to sort of create that environment and infrastructure, then
exactly. And Man Sail is Man Sail is a great case study for that, and there's a lot of chat about a lot of investment in the Middle East now, and look at recently with Saudi Arabia and the investments that they've been making in the Gulf world, and some extraordinary developments that are coming out of that part of the world. What's the legacy that's going with it? Yes, it's easy to take a sports event into these countries for 5, 6, 7 days, set up a tent and throw some TV cameras and then leave. To me, I think the important thing is creating a longer term legacy and having a fleet of boats. And I know there's a Jeddah Yacht Club that took delivery of a fleet of Far East 28 boats that are now in situ year round. That's a perfect opportunity for us, if anyone is listening, to be able to create a match racing academy and even a World Match Racing Tour event because the boats were already there. So think longer term year round legacy is not just what someone can do in 7 or 10 days of an event. I think the sport, whether it's not just match racing, but across all levels of the sport, and particularly with the kiteboarding and windsurfing that we're seeing, I think there's a huge opportunity for the sport to push itself and promote itself more in more emerging markets than the more dominated ones that you talk about.
Okay, James, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, are we off the record now? No, I think it's good. It's good stuff.
That's it for this episode. Join the conversation on Twitter at Yacht Business, on Instagram, The Yacht Business, or find us on Facebook. The Yacht Business podcast is produced by Pelot Media. I'm David Fuller. Until next time.